Today we are going to talk about how to set up consent mode V2 using CookieYes, which is a popular consent management platform. I'm going to share with you the different ways I do this depending on the context in my client. There are basically two approaches. You can either use Google Tag Manager to add the cookie banner scripts and make sure that the consent states are working correctly. The second approach is that you can add the scripts to your code directly and then configure your tags in Google Tag Manager. I'm going to explain the advantages of each approach and what I do recommend. All of this in the next section. So without further ado, let's get into this video. There are basically two approaches. The first one is what I call the direct script injection. In here, basically what you will do is you will add the consent default in the cookie banner script to your website instead of using Google Tag Manager. First, you need to set up a default consent state, and this is a separate script from the cookie banner. Then you add below it the cookie banner script before adding the EGGM scripts in configuring your tags. So this is the approach that I recommend to my clients. But in case the client has some issues with accessing the back office, or I do not have access to the developers, I will use Google Tag Manager and maybe move to this at some point. So with Google Tag Manager, the approach is more straightforward, but has its own limitations, which I'm going to discuss later. Here you will add basically the tag template to Google Tag Manager for cookies. There is an official template for this. You will set up a default consent state using the same tag template and then configure your tags. Are going to start with the first method, which is using Google Tag Manager to load our cookie banner. The first step is to head to our tags. We are going to create a new tag and use our template gallery to look for CookieYes official tag templates. We need to get our website key and set up the default consent setting. Let's go to CookieYes back office, navigate to advanced settings in your dashboard and click on get installation code. I'm going to select install with Google Tag Manager and then copy the key here. I'm going to get back to Google Tag Manager and I'm not going to paste it as a hard-coded string. I'm going to use the constant, always a best practice, and then I will just paste it here. Going to save. Now we have our key. We need to move to the default consent setting. I will click on add setting. I'm not interested in setting up any regional configuration to have different settings for different countries. I'm going to just set everything to, or almost every setting here, to disabled besides the necessary cookies. So we are almost done. For the trigger, I'm going to use this consent trigger right here, which is always recommended for setting up the initial loading of the cookie banner. And I'm going to save. Time to preview our container. And this is how you set up the first part, which is loading the cookie banner. We need to make sure that our update consent command is working. You can see here that everything is set to denied, and I will click on accept all, go back to Google Tag Manager, and I should see the changes. It seems like everything is working correctly. In a later part of this video, I'm going to show you how to set up the actual tags to fire on the consent update. Okay, so let's talk about the direct website injection approach. And as you can see here that I paused my cookie banner tag in Google Tag Manager because I'm going to basically use the script directly in my website. I'm going to head back to my back office. I'm using WordPress. It might be a bit different for you. This is just an example. You can see here that I have my Google Tag Manager script. I need to do first is to set the default consent state. And in order to do this, I need to paste the script right here, which sets the default consent to denied besides the security storage. This is the equivalent of what we've done here in Google Tag Manager. This is where we configure default consent states. This code basically does or replicates the same functionality. This is the first part. So we have our defaults. We need the actual script to load the cookie banner. I'm going to get it from my CookieYes back office. This time, instead of installing it with Google Check Manager, I'm going to choose the manual option and copy the code. I'm going to go back here right below my default. This is the cookie banner before Google Check Manager. You can see here that my cookie banner is loading, and I use this extension right here to check the default consent command in the update command. So I'm going to click on accept. You can see here that my cookie banner is working correctly. Now we are going to start with the implementation process for our tags. We have a cookie banner that is loading properly with the proper states. And as you can see here, I have a Google tag for my analytics property, and it has no trigger, but I have my ID added here, which is a constant always. For the trigger, I will create a new trigger, and it's going to be an event, and it is called cookie consent update. You can see that I pasted here the event. I'm going to show you how this works when I preview my Google tag. For the advanced settings, I'm going to start with the advanced consent mode. And basically for advanced consent mode, you need to just make sure it is no additional consent required. Let's preview and see what happens. So in my preview mode, you can see here that this event is generated each time I interact with the cookie banner. So let's say I reject the cookies. You can see here that there is a new event in line 15, in one in line 10. So each time I interact with the cookie banner and I change my consent state, it will show up here. And my Google tag will always fire using this event. And I will go to the consent tab, and you can see here that my consent states are working properly. I rejected the cookies. You can see here that the tracking is denied. You can see here that it's reflecting the actual consent state. So this is the advanced version of consent mode. Just make sure that you are using the trigger when the cookie banner updates the consent state, which I showed you. It's called cookie consent update. Also, I'm going to leave a template for Google Check Manager because I'm going to use some advanced techniques for my basic consent mode. And if you want to use it or download it, I will leave it somewhere in the comments or in the description. We will move to the basic version of consent mode in the next section. We are going to talk about the basic consent mode. There is really two ways to do this. There is the built-in consent feature, which is you check this radio button right here and add a required consent. This is an analytics tag. I can select my analytics storage as a requirement to fire the tag. In preview, my analytics storage is denied. Let's take a look at our Google tag. You can see that it's not firing. I will change the consent state to accept all, go back to preview mode, and you can see that the Google tag is firing. This is the built-in feature, which is still in beta, and it has a few issues that are beyond the scope of this video. Sometimes it does not work as expected. What I do recommend is to use blocking trigger. I'm going to walk you through the process. CookieYes, it does not push a dash layer event for each parameter. It just pushes this event called cookie consent update. You do not have the state for the analytics storage, etc. in the data layer. So what you need to do is I'm going to go to my website and inspect it. I'm going to go to the application section. Under cookies, I will select my website right here and look for a cookie called CookieYes consent. This cookie right here stores the consent states. I need to copy the name of my cookie. I will need to go to my variable section, create a new variable. I will select first party cookie and then paste CookieYes consent, which is the name of my cookie. This will help you decode the cookie and basically format it properly. So make sure that it is checked. Open our preview mode, and what we are looking for is this value right here, which is the first party cookie variable we created earlier. You can see here that I have key values here. We've got the consent ID. What we are looking for is the consent states that are stored in the cookie. You can see here that we've got the analytics, the performance, the necessary cookies, basically everything we need to set up our triggers. We cannot use this as is. We need to parse the cookie. The next step is to create a regex table that is responsible for parsing the cookie value and establishing the consent state based on whether the consent was granted or denied. I'm going back to my variables. I'm going to create a new variable, search for regex table, and I'm going to set a default variable first to not forget it, which should be denied, of course. I'm going to add a row, and for the pattern, I'm going to use this pattern to match everything in my cookie value ID. I'm going to just look for the exact name copy it, and between the brackets, I'm going to paste the analytics value. If we have this pattern right here, I'm going to set it to granted. I'm going to save, preview again. So it's working. You can see here that it's set to granted because our consent is granted. I'm going to try and deny the tracking and see if it will return denied. And you can see here that it is equal to denied right now. So this is only for the analytics storage. I'm going to do basically the same thing for add storage as well. So I'm going to open my variable, create a copy of it, and delete this part, and then I'm going to save. Preview again, and it is set to denied. I'm going to accept cookies, go back to my preview mode, and it is now set to granted. The next step is to configure the trigger to block our tracking when we do not have the proper consent state. So I'm going ahead and open my Google tag. You can see here that it's firing normally under cookie consent update. There is no blocking triggers. I'm going to modify my trigger, add an exception. I will add a new one, the custom event. I'm going to use this regex action right here to match any event, and then I will add some custom events, and I'm going to look for the analytics consent. So if it's set to denied, I'm going to block my event. Here I will name it analytic block. I'm going to save, preview again, look for consent update. Our consent is set to granted. I'm going to deny the tracking, go back, and you can see that our Google tag was blocked because there is no consent. So this is basically how you configure the basic consent mode without relying on the built-in template. Thank you for watching, and in the upcoming videos, I'm going to show you more examples in how to configure consent mode v2. Until next time.